Good morning, Chair Hasid and members of the board. We are now recording and live.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. It is 10:10 a.m., and this meeting of the Agricultural Labor Relations Board is now called to order. Apologize for the late start. We had some audio issues that were going to compromise our web conference, but thankful to our staff. Julie, are you? Okay, I thought you were motioning. Okay. Before we go ahead and get started more formally, even if you're able to hear me now, we do have a Spanish interpretation available this morning. Please select your preferred language, either English or Spanish, to ensure you're able to hear all of the content of the meeting. I will pause to allow that to be relayed in Spanish.
Buenos días y gracias por acompañarnos hoy en nuestra junta. Tenemos servicio de interpretación por medio de Zoom. Hacia el abajo de su pantalla hay un glóbulo para interpretación. Por favor, haga clic allí y escoja su idioma. Aunque vaya a escuchar en inglés, por favor, haga esa selección para que pueda escuchar bien. Gracias.
Thank you, Santiago. We will now go into the business portion of the meeting. I will call the roll. Board Member Broad.
Present.
Board Member Flores.
Present.
Board Member Hall. Board Member Hall will hopefully be able to join us. He has reporting for jury duty, performing his civic duty. Board Member Lightstone.
Present.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is approval of the most recent meeting minutes from June 12th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Board Member Flores moved and Board Member Broad seconded. We will now go through roll call order in order to approve the minutes. Board Member Broad.
Aye.
Board Member Flores.
Aye.
Board Member Lightstone.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. The minutes are now approved. Next, we'll go on to the chair's report. I have a few items to share with you today. First, I am very pleased to share that our colleague, Board Member Broad, was confirmed by the California State Senate last week. So he is now in his term, and we are very excited as he's been a delight to have on the board, a wonderful colleague, and contributed greatly to the work of the agency. So thank you. Thank you, State Senate and Governor Newsom, and excited we're past that process. I also wanted to share an update with the board regarding a recent initiative by our Labor and Workforce Development Agency Secretary Knox. He is furthering an equity initiative, and as part of that initiative, he has asked his staff to convene a group that will focus, that will have a four-part racial, he's conducting, or having staff conduct, I should say, a four-part racial equity training series. This series intends to address topics including racial bias and systemic inequity, and it also aims to increase the agency's cultural competence so that we can enhance our ability agency-wide to serve the public more effectively. And I'm very pleased to share that the ALRB has a very strong cohort participating in this training. We have our Assistant General Counsel, Francesca Herrera, participating, our Chief Administrative Services, Brian Darity, our Communications and Outreach Manager, Daniela Ramirez, and our HR Manager, Michelle Seafried. And I want to thank them for their enthusiastic participation. The first of these training sessions was held last week and will be going on through the summer and into the fall. I'm very excited, again, about our team's strong commitment to working on addressing these issues, and I want to echo that I and the board are committed to supporting those staff that are participating in this series, and I'm really eager to hear what strategies and ideas you bring back that we can hopefully implement on an enterprise level to ensure that we are fulfilling our mission effectively and with equity in mind, and also, again, operating as a first-run kind of state-of-the-art agency. We know that having diverse workforces makes us stronger, and more effective. It's been proven by empirical research on multiple metrics in both the private and the public sector, and we are no different. And I want to make sure that we foster an inclusive workplace that allows everyone to contribute and work to the best of their abilities. So thanks again to our staff for participating, and I know the General Counsel is also really excited and shares those sentiments as well, and I wanted to apprise the board of that. The next, the final part of the report was on the agenda. The board is proposing, or I am proposing, that we make some changes to the subpoena form. A copy of the form is posted on the meeting tabs of our website, where you can also see the agenda. There are some formatting only changes that I believe need to be tweaked, but in terms of the written content, it is accurate, and this provides more clarification on what type of subpoena is being issued, and also provides relevant applicable noticing requirements for failure to comply and other rights for those in receipt of the subpoena. I will look to our Chief Board Counsel, Todd. Anything else we should mention on this front?
No, I think that covers it. The substantive changes are geared, as you said, to more clearly identifying the nature of the subpoena issued and providing more informative disclosures to subpoenaed parties in terms of the procedures for objecting to subpoenas and the consequences of noncompliance.
You missed some acrobatics here off screen by Executive Secretary, who thankfully did not trip.
Sorry
okay.
to have missed it.
All right. Thank you, Todd, and thank you, Satya, who's been helping get the form to look presentable and actually be practically usable. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, I am making a motion for the board to approve these changes to the form. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Broad. May I have a second? Second. Thank you, Member Flores, and we'll go through voice vote for approval. Board Member Broad?
Aye.
Board Member Flores?
Aye.
Board Member Lightstone?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. The new subpoena form has been approved. Next, we will turn to our acrobatic Executive Secretary, Santiago Avila Gomez, to give a report on unfair labor practices, complaints, and election matters. Santiago.
Yep, okay. Can folks hear me out in Zoom land? Thumbs up.
Julian Yesenia, are you able to hear Santiago? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, and then, oh, well, I'm holding the mic, okay. Since our last board meeting, we've had one administrative order issue. I'm sorry, I've got the wrong report in front of me. It was a precedential order that was issued, and the beauty of having a microphone, I can move around. And that was in the United Farm Workers of America and Monterey Mushrooms. That's 2024 ARB Admin Order Number 2024-21-P, designating as precedential. That's an order denying respondent UFW's request for special permission to appeal ALJ's order regarding motion to dismiss and motion to strike. That issued on June 18th, and the case numbers are 2019 CL 005, and all this executive report and others are found on the meetings tab as indicated by the chair. Turning to pending matters, there's DMB Packing Corp. doing business as the Damari Company, and that's 2023 RM 001 VIS. That was the board's receipt of the first majority support petition filed. And the ALJ decision issued in March 18th, exceptions April 8th, replies April 29th, closing the briefing period. Turning to the next matter, Hosai Guy Farms, there is a pending regarding general counsel's request for enforcement of a subpoena duces tecum that was issued to Hokusai Farms, and that was filed on June 13th, 2024. And finally, Garrett Farming, Inc., 2012 CE 041 et al. That involves 49 ALRB number 2 and 44 ALRB number 1, those 4 decisions. And there is amended make-whole specification that was filed to conform with the board decision and order, and there's a request to adopt that new make-whole specification. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Santiago. Appreciate it. I don't have any questions to any of my colleagues. No? Okay. Our next agenda item is the litigation report from our Chief Board Counsel, Todd Ratchin. Todd?
Yes, thank you. So just a few updates since the last meeting in the litigation pending in Kern County Superior involving Wonderful Nurseries. A group of Wonderful's agricultural employees have filed a motion to intervene in the lawsuit. The hearing on that motion is set for July 11th. The board's opposition or any response to the motion is due tomorrow, June 27th. And the board's response to Wonderful's complaint remains due on July 17th.
Thank you very much, Todd. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your work. Our next agenda item is the General Counsel's report with General Counsel Julie Montgomery.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to briefly review a few outreach events that our regional office staff has been covering, and then our outreach manager, Daniela Ramirez, will appear to provide a little more detail about a couple of those events. So since our last meeting, our staff have provided a virtual training presentation for the staff of Proteus Porterville office in Tulare County. They showed up at a pop-up tabling event at the U.S.-Mexico border in Calexico, which is in Imperial County. Our staff tabled and distributed materials at the Oaxacan Community Shed hosted by Center for Farm Worker Families in Watsonville, which is Santa Cruz County. They provided outreach and distributed materials at an event called Tacos con Derechos, so tacos with rights in English, in Sanger, which is in, I think, Fresno County, hosted by Valley Forward in collaboration with the Jakara Movement, UFW Foundation, FIRM, and UCSF Fresno. And then they also did an in-person training presentation at a meeting hosted by the Dolores Huerta Foundation, Vecinos Comité, Wasco in Kern County. And as usual, our staff provided in-person office hours at the nonprofit organization Cause in Santa Maria, Santa Barbara County. And they also did outreach at a resource fair in the city of Mecca in Riverside County. Did outreach at a summer community fair hosted by Santa Paula Social Services Coalition in Santa Paula, which is in eastern Ventura County. And then finally, they, yeah, and that's it actually, as I already mentioned, the office hours at Cause. So those are the events. And then I'm going to turn it over to Daniela to provide a little more information about a couple of those events that she's attended. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to give some more information on some of the events that we performed in actually Region 2. So, you know, part of our work in here with outreach is building partnerships and collaborations. And so part of that is with community-based organizations who are who have worker groups, and I'm going to talk about one of those recent work that kind of came to fruition after providing staff training. This was the Dolores Huerta Foundation, in particular. That this one occurred on June 19th, and we were invited to provide a presentation to one of their Vecino chapters, as was mentioned. This was located in Wasco, and they have regular meetings. So our staff attorney, Xavier, and our training and community engagement specialist, Lucia, went and presented. We did have a surprise presenter that helped give some pointers to our presentation, which was Dolores Huerta herself. But we did present to 40 what they call Vecino members, who are all engaged in activities to improve their neighborhoods. We got various questions from them, and also various tips from Dolores Huerta, who was there during the history of our of ALRB and the ALRA. So wanted to just mention that information. I think it was a very successful presentation, and we're looking forward to building on that collaboration. Then we also did what we called a pop-up. This was at the U.S.-Mexico border. This was 2 to 4 in the morning, and ALRB staff member, training and community engagement specialist Omar, conducted this outreach. He handed out about 100 to 200 blue pamphlets, which are our new pamphlets, in an 8-block radius from near the border, and approached groups of workers who were waiting for transportation. So he was able to answer questions, letting people know where we're located and that we were accessible to them, although we were, our office is in Indio. So we're planning on another similar pop-up this for July, and we'll be providing not only the blue pamphlet, but also our information, or our small flyer on that's related to heat. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, both Julie and Daniela. And I really wanted the board to hear about these, the 2 events in particular that Daniela mentioned. When she shared them with me, it was it really just made my day. I was just so impressed with just how motivated and above and beyond our staff go, and wanted to acknowledge that, and wanted to share that good work with the board. Lucia, I know, has been famous for kind of going from north to south, wherever she's needed, she'll go. And I loved seeing the photos from the Dolores Huerta event. Just beautiful photos and really, really cool work. And not every day you get to have a civil rights icon be your co-presenter, so that's awesome. And I don't think Omar was able to join the meeting today, but I just loved how he had an idea, and really in the spirit of meeting workers where they're at and really serving the population that we need to serve, he developed this idea and piloted it, and that it sounded like it was successful. He went to the border at 2 in the morning, and Daniela shared that his feedback was he just wished he'd gone a little bit earlier, in 1:30 in the morning, just to talk to more people. So we don't know if he got photos, but I was hoping to see him in action, and just really commend that work. And I know our staff across the state, in ways big and small, really go above and beyond, and just wanted to highlight those 2 recent actions. So I see, Julie, your hand is up, so I'll go to you first.
Thank you. I also just wanted to add that on top of doing all the outreach and community events, I just want to give a shout out to our staff who have also jumped in and just worked on these majority support petitions when they're filed, and also the expedited investigations, our regular ULP investigations, and just keeping all that work moving. And meeting those extremely strict deadlines, while also just being involved in the community and making sure that people know who we are and that we're a resource and what their rights are. I just think that's also critically important, and it's just a testament to the dedication, commitment, and passion of our staff at the ALRB. So just want to give a shout out to all the staff who've been doing fantastic work, and also to Yesenia De Luna, who's here, our Region 2 Regional Director, for her leadership in these past few weeks with everything that's been going on in that region.
Thank you, Julie. And yes, I echo, and I think the board also echoes that gratitude. I know Region 2 in particular has been very, very, very busy, and I know folks from across the regions have been pitching in to help support. So really appreciate that, and thank you, Yesenia. What a way to start off as a regional director. But you're doing great. Do any of my colleagues have any comments or questions? Okay. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Daniela, and the team. We do not have an administrative services report today. There has been a budget deal, but it hasn't been signed off, so we are going to wait until it is done, and then we'll get an update from Brian on that. We do not have a legislative report. I do believe there is a small update or a short update on regulations, and so I'll turn it over to Todd to give that.
Yes, thank you. Just a very short update. Last Friday, June 21st, we formally noticed the modified language and some additional information added to the rulemaking file and the pending rulemaking involving the AB 113 statutory amendments, so majority support petitions and revising our compliance regulations. The comment period regarding the modifications closes on July 22nd, which is 31 days from the notice. So 30th day that the board had determined to provide for comment in this segment of the rulemaking falls on a Sunday. So it just carries over to the next day.
And Board Member Broad?
Yes. I would like to request that the board set the matter for a public hearing at the end of the comment period, or as close to the end of the comment period as we can, so that members of the public who wish to comment can actually address the board specifically about the regulatory proposals.
Okay, so prior to July 22nd?
If we can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Why don't...
Or, I mean, I guess we could extend, if that doesn't work date-wise, we could extend it a little bit, the comment period, until it, makes a date that we can actually do it.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying
don't
to
know.
think. In order, I would be hesitant to extend the comment period just because it has been kicked out a little bit. So I want to make sure we get the regulations done timely. We're in summer, so I'm just trying to think through if, the best way to do it. But I think probably having it that week of the week of July 15th would make sense. Let's look at a date and then we can set that up. I think given some other case matters, it should be separate from a board meeting.
So like a special meeting?
Yeah, I think a special meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to vote on that?
I'm looking at I don't think we do need to vote on that. I think we can set it and then it just has to be properly noticed.
I think it's important because it's the only chance for there to be a dialogue between the board and the public over what the regulations say and what people think, which, otherwise we're doing it entirely off of written comments,
Yeah.
which I don't think may not be sufficient to really understand what people are saying and why they're saying it. So I'd like the board to be in the position to ask witnesses questions and so forth if they show up. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, I definitely appreciate that opportunity. My only hesitation is we did have that opportunity and no one came outside of our staff. And parties can request a hearing, and so I'm wondering if we should just wait for parties to request it
I don't,
And we would certainly comply.
right, I just, no party has requested it so far, so I figure time is moving along. It's only 30 days, and some of that 30 days has been elapsed, so I thought it might be best that we just set it ourselves.
Okay.
And, you know, if nobody comes, but I don't know how Ralph feels, but I think probably he wouldn't disagree that the subcommittee feels that, more comment and discussion is better than not enough. And we are probably a little bit concerned that some of the parties are so thoroughly, involved in litigation before us that maybe they're not, you know, focusing, or they're just stretched too thin. Whatever the issue is, we want to just give them the maximum chance to comment.
Okay. All right. We'll set the date and, we'll aim for July 15th, the week of July 15th to do that.
Yeah. So I just want to add, if anyone's listening, we're really to reaffirm that I think anything we can do to get input from people,
Yeah, no, I agree.
stakeholders, is very useful for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. And with that, we will now go on to, a special presentation that we have today that I'm very excited to share with the board. We are having a presentation from representatives from the U.S. Department of Labor, the Employment Training Administration. They are the ones who are charged with conducting the National Agriculture Workers Survey, known as the NAWS. Many entities, particularly in labor world, look to the survey for information to better understand the nature of agricultural work and help inform policy decisions. The NAWS is is proposing some changes in the Federal Register, and we'll have more on this at a subsequent meeting, but the ALRB and our sister agencies are planning on issuing a comment on some of those changes. We appreciate the opportunity. I had the benefit of hearing a little bit about this at a meeting last month convened by the UC Davis Agricultural Research Department and with Dr. Phil Martin and others, and wanted to have the rest of the board have the opportunity to hear this information as well as our staff, and wanted to give a forum. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm checking, I'm not seeing Daniel Carroll. Is he still presenting today? Oh, he's unable to join us. Okay. So we have another guest, Andrew Padavani, who works for, want to make sure I get the acronym correct, JBS International, and he is the NAWS Project Director. So I will turn it over to Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me. Do you have my presentation, or do I need to share it?
I believe we have it, and Santiago is going to put it up as well.
Okay, great. Well, I guess just thank you, Victoria, for inviting us, and thank you to all the board members for giving me a few minutes of your time to hear about the NAWS. Daniel Carroll, who's the DOL representative who administers the NAWS project, is unable to join us today, but we will have another representative a little later from DOL, Emily Fincham. She should be joining us relatively
right here.
soon. Oh, hey, Emily. And we'll get started. I am not able to see the presentation, so if it's up, I'm not sure.
We are working on sharing it. It may be, if you're able to easily share, that would be great, because we're having some issues on our end. I apologize.
Okay. Let's see. Oh,
That works.
Oh, here we go.
yeah, there we are.
Thank you.
So I'll just ask for the next slide when it's time.
That sounds good.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so today I'm going to be presenting data on California crop workers. So I'm Andrew Padavani. I'll be the primary presenter. The data in the slide was put together by our lead analyst, Wensen Feng, and then Emily will be telling us about some of the changes that are coming to the NAS survey, or at least that we're hoping are coming to the NAS survey, and an exciting new data tool for public access that we're really excited to share with you guys. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit of background: the National Agricultural Workers Survey, or NAS, is really the only national study of crop workers in the United States. That includes migrant and seasonal crop workers. It does not currently include H-2A workers, although we are working to get them added to our survey. We are a primary source of national and regional data on crop workers. We collect information on demographics, on employment and employment history, health access, household information, their family, both in the United States and who might be living abroad if they're supporting a family abroad. We have 36 years of data that is collected approximately continuously throughout the year. We collect data, we break the calendar year up into what we call cycles. There are 3 cycles every year, and they roughly follow the like fall, winter, spring, and then summer. And that is so that we spread our interviews across the entire calendar year so that we get both the intensive harvest periods and the less intensive, so that we capture data with the cycle of agriculture. Next slide, please. Thank you. The NAS is a multi-stage stratified random sample survey. That means, we have a map up here. This show us the NAS regions. These are based on USDA agricultural regions. You can see California on the left side of the map in a little yellow color. California is its own region, being the largest ag labor state. It is its own region, and we are able to report publicly accessible data at the California level, which is the only state we're able to report state level data for. We randomly sample what we call farm labor areas, which are either counties or collections of counties. We sample every single region in every cycle. And these regions are represented in different colors on the map. So we try to, we get interviews within every region, every cycle, but not necessarily every state. We collect between 1,100 and 3,600 interviews every year with crop workers. We start by contacting growers, that is establishments, and then from there we interview workers. So we interview workers in the field while they're working, not necessarily while they're working, but they have to be engaged in a specific crop related task at the time of the interview or on the day of the interview. So we're interviewing current crop workers in the United States. And we do have, as I've mentioned, we have public use data. So that is publicly available NAS data. It is available at what we call the super region level. So certain regions we will combine together, and that's for non-disclosure purposes. And that data is publicly available. And we do have a more we do have a restricted data set that allows for allows for you to access data at the county level, but not report at the county level. Next slide, please. So we collect information on demographic characteristics, that is their age, their gender, their place of birth, education. Oh, we lost the presentation there for a moment. We also collect data on housing characteristics, the type of dwelling, how many rooms are in it, how many people are living in the housing unit. We collect information about their current job, their wage, how they're paid, various questions about the types of do they have access to water? Do they have access to bathrooms? We collect a 12-month history of the crop worker, that is, where and how long have they worked and how many periods of work have they had in the last 12 months? Have they spent time abroad? Have they had periods of non-work? Have they worked in non-crop work? We collect information on their income, their family income, what kind of assets they might own, such as a car, their use of assistance programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, TAMP. We collect a lifetime health history of whether they have chronic health issues, and then we ask questions about their health insurance coverage and their access and use of healthcare. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with demographics. So next slide, please. So this is probably not surprising to anybody in the room. 80% or so of crop workers in California are male. These workers tend to be, they're more likely to be migrant workers. They're less likely to have their nuclear family with them. That is, if they have a wife and children, usually they don't accompany the male crop worker. We are seeing more female crop workers over time. But still only about 1 in 4 crop workers we see are female. Next slide, please. An important change in particularly the California crop labor force is the crop labor force has gotten significantly older. So what we're looking at is an age distribution of crop workers. The orange line there is California. That is data from between 2018 and 2022. That is the most recent reporting period. The blue line is crop workers in all other regions, excluding California. When the blue line when the orange line is above the blue line, that means there are more workers in that particular age group than in other parts of the US. And so perhaps what you'll see is right off the bat, on the left-hand side, we have the younger age groups, and there are more of those workers in other parts of the country than in California. And that orange line is above the blue line in the middle age groups. That is between 29 and 50, essentially. So the bulk of California crop workers are kind of middle-aged workers, working age workers. And then we have similar shares of older workers. We do interview older workers. We have seen workers as old as 70 and 80 in the current set of data. Not very many of them, but a few of them. And that's been the major change. Crop workers have gotten older everywhere, but they have gotten particularly older in California relative to everywhere else. And the average age, you can see up in the top right, of a crop worker in California is about 42 years. In other parts of the country, they're about 39. The average is about 39. Next slide, please. Thank you. About half of these workers, a little more than half of these workers, are not authorized to work in the United States. About a quarter of those workers have work authorization under some kind of green card program. That could be the family program or like a refugee or asylum visa would also be included in here. We don't see very many of those workers, but they are in here. About 1 in 5 workers are U.S. citizens. And there are very few workers with some other kind of work authorization. So that could be like a border crossing or a commuter card, or some other kind of like non-immigrant visa that has work authorization. Next slide, please. Thank you. And perhaps not surprisingly, This is an immigrant workforce. About 90% or more of crop workers in California are immigrants, were born outside the United States. 90% of them were born in Mexico, or excuse me, 80% of the total workforce was born in Mexico, and about 10% U.S. citizens. Next slide, please. Now some information about employment and income. Next slide, please. So at the time of the interview, when we interview the workers, about 2/3 of those workers are working in some kind of fruit or nut. And that's probably not surprising given the Central Valley and how heavy in fruits and nuts that is. About 1 in 5 workers are working in some kind of vegetable, and then about 10% in horticulture, which could be like a nursery or some kind of breeding related activity. Next slide, please. And these workers at the time of the interview were most often performing some kind of semi-skilled work. So this could be like tractor driving or some kind of specialized task. And then the other workers, we most often find them working in some kind of pre-harvest task. And then, a smaller number of workers are performing some kind of harvest or post-harvest task. Next slide, please. Thank you. So next, I want to talk about the mean real hourly wage. That is, the real wage is a wage that is adjusted for inflation. And we're looking at, this is the full period of the NAWS since 1989 in 4 or 5 year periods. We have to combine some years into 5-year bins, unfortunately. So we started in 1989 at about $10 an hour, a little above $10 an hour, and today we're about $15.60 or so an hour, and that is a little bit above other regions in the United States, but not a whole lot. So the real wage has grown about 60% since 1989, which is good to see. Unfortunately, next slide, please. For those of you who live in California, this is maybe you're seeing your own personal experience here. Housing costs have gone up a lot more. So on average, workers are paying about $940 per month for housing, compared to about $400 back in 1989. And this is the real housing cost, so it's adjusted for inflation. This is in 2022 dollars. And in other parts of the United States, housing costs have also gone up, but nowhere near as much. So housing costs in California have increased about 130%, so more than twice as much as the real wages. So this is a big challenge for crop workers at the current moment. Next slide, please.
Andrew, this is Victoria. I had a question. If you go back actually one more slide, Santiago, to look at the wage growth. So in California, it looks like we were below the national mean from roughly 2005 until 2015 or 16. It's a little hard to say. I'm just curious if you have a sense of that. I know the federal minimum wage has not been adjusted in a long time, since before 2010, I think. California has been a leader on minimum wage generally. When I'm looking at that time period where it crossed again and California started to have a higher mean wage, the things that come to mind are the passage of, we had some minimum wage increases, including the passage of SB 3, and then also clarification around piece rate and non-productive time due to some court cases and subsequent legislation. But I'm just wondering if you have any sense from the data or your own experience or other information, just why California was below in that kind of mid-2006 to 2015 period.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll be honest, I'm not completely sure off the top of my head. But I think that you are right about the fast growth in wages after that period are, a lot of that is due to the changes in wage legislation, like the minimum wage, and some of the other things that you've mentioned. And beyond that, part of this is a supply and demand effect. You saw from the workforce, there are fewer younger workers, and so workers are becoming harder to find in California relative to other places. And so part of this is just, farmers have to offer higher wages to attract workers. But I will look into this, the early 2000s period and see if we have a clear or a suggestive explanation for why California might be below. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah, I
question.
guess the other thought that occurred to me is maybe we just had more commodities that were just, at the minimum rate at whatever time period it was compared to other states. But it's interesting to me that gap, because it looks prior to that, like we track pretty closely, but then there's that period post Great Recession that's interesting. Just really interesting to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll look into that and get back to you. Okay, let's go forward 2 slides, please. Thank you. So we also ask about family income from the crop worker. So this is all income, all family income. And we see that most California crop worker families are earning, somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 a year. We see some workers with higher wages and a few workers with lower wages. This kind of mixes in workers who are what we would say are more attached to the crop labor force. That is, they get more of their income, their yearly income from crop work. So some of the lower income families are families who are kind of, they perform a little bit of crop work throughout the year, but it's not their primary source of income. We are seeing, these are nominal numbers. These aren't real numbers because we only ask within an age range, or excuse me, an income range. We are seeing, but we do see, higher family incomes over time. So these incomes, we're seeing more in the higher income categories than we saw in the previous reporting period. So incomes are going up, which is always good, although still low. Next slide, please. And by that same token, so we don't ask workers directly about their poverty status. We impute it, that is, we calculate it from their answers, and we estimate that approximately 20% of crop worker families actually have incomes that fall below the poverty level, and about 80% of workers fall above the poverty level, although most of these workers are kind of just over the poverty level. So this doesn't mean that, everybody is happy and healthy. This just means that their income is a little bit above the poverty line. Okay, next slide, please. And next, I'll present some information on health and healthcare access. So this data, as I said, we report at the California level, but I don't have California specific data today, although it's quite similar to the national figures. So if I could have the next slide. And again, these are national level values, not California specific. So nationwide, about half of crop workers report that they have some kind of health insurance, and this is substantially increased since the oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the
ACA.
The ACA, thank you. It was on the tip of my tongue. Yes, so we see a substantial increase in the likelihood of a worker saying they have health insurance after the ACA was passed. So right now, about 52% of workers say they have health insurance. Of that 52%, about 41% say they received their health insurance from some kind of government provided program, so most often Medicaid. About 1 in 4 workers say they receive it from their employer, and about 13%, so this is about 1 in 8, say they pay for it themselves, or they receive it from a spouse or a parent. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the kinds of, we asked them about what kinds of healthcare services they use. They are primarily seeking preventive type care, with next often receiving some kind of dental care, routine dental care, and then a few workers are seeking healthcare services for illness or injury. Next slide, please. We ask workers about their chronic health conditions. That is, these are conditions that a nurse or a doctor has told them they have. And then we ask them about tests that they might have had related to these conditions and the results of those tests. So about 40% of crop workers nationwide report some kind of chronic condition. About 17% say they have been diagnosed with high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and then of course diabetes and other kinds of chronic conditions are also frequent in this population. Next slide, please. We also ask them, when they seek healthcare, where do they get services from? And primarily, we see that they are receiving services from private clinics or from a doctor's office. But next most often, workers are receiving care from community or migrant health centers. So these community and migrant health centers are, important pieces of the healthcare system for these workers. And then for issues related to illness or injury, we also see some workers more often going to the hospital or the emergency room, depending on the issue at the time. Next slide, please. For dental care, that is treatment or routine care like cleaning, they are most often seeing a dentist, although some workers do report receiving these services from a private clinic or a community health center. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague at DOL, Emily, to talk about some changes to the NAS.
Thanks so much, Andrew. So the insights that Andrew has shared with us today illustrate just how powerful a tool the NAS is to understand the characteristics and experiences of the U.S. crop workforce. But we are always focused on how we can improve both the representativeness of the survey as well as increasing the utility of that data to understand pressing economic and public health challenges facing the U.S. crop workforce. To that end, we currently have a Federal Register notice posted that details some pretty major changes that we're proposing to the NAS. The first is to include H-2A workers in the NAS sample. Now, due to a long sort of history of why the NAS was created, H-2A workers simply weren't included. They were enumerated through other means in the federal government. So we didn't necessarily need the NAS to estimate that aspect of labor supply. However, two things have changed. Obviously, the H-2A workforce has increased exponentially over the past intervening 3 decades. And also, the NAS has really evolved into this really robust tool for understanding demographics, employment characteristics, types of information that we just don't get from other data resources in the federal government. So this is going to be probably the biggest change that we'll see, or that we're proposing, is to actually include H-2A workers in our sampling strategy. Additionally, we've been working with other federal agencies to develop questions on foodborne illness transmission to try and really understand what are the major vectors for foodborne illness transmission in crop work. We are trying to understand heat-related illness, and in particular the supports and resources that crop workers have available, and training that they have available to avoid heat-related illness, as well as trying to understand what the incidence and prevalence of heat-related illness is in the fields, and also expanding our repertoire to include questions on precision agriculture, so automation technology to increase agricultural productivity. Finally, we are going to go ahead and change our race and ethnicity questions to align with the new OMB guidance. So these are the big changes that we have coming up. If we go to the next slide, please. We also have, next slide, please. Thank you so much. We also have
One moment, sorry. Are you able to slow down just a little bit? We want to make sure our interpreter is able to catch everything as well.
Oh,
Sorry for
absolutely. Not a problem.
Thank you.
So additionally, we recently launched a data tool to try and increase the accessibility of NAS data to a variety of different stakeholders. So if you're to go on our website right now and see all of our different information that we have, you'll see that the public use data set is available. However, there are huge barriers, to accessing data. We have to have data savviness. You have to, be a person who likes to sit down with Excel or whatever your preferred statistical suite is. Well, in order to kind of break down some of those barriers, we developed the NAS Data Finder to provide some of the most high-level sort of summary statistics on a wide variety of different topics. So if you look at this image here, you can see this is the if you go to our website and click on NAS Data Finder on that left-hand navigation, you'll see this page come up. You can choose the time period that you're interested in. We go in 2-year intervals for individual interval data, but we also have data that represents the entirety of the NAS sort of tenure, and that data is presented in 5-year intervals. The topics that you can access include demographics, employment, housing, some health characteristics, and some data on income, assets, and earnings. We also have the ability with this data tool to generate some cross-tabulation. So if you're interested, you can look at, say, hourly wages by different work authorization statuses or different migration statuses. If you'll flip to the next slide, please. This just illustrates for you what some of the output might look like if you were to utilize this tool. Over on the left hand, where we see the filter data table, you'll see we've selected a given year set, a different topic. This one gives you educational attainment, for instance. And then if you were to run that, what you'll see is a table pop up giving you the data that you seek. You're also able to download tables, especially with our all years tables. Some of that can get a little bit onerous on a single screen, but you can download the tables and use Excel to kind of filter out what you're actually interested in and generate visualizations, all that good stuff. So we hope that this tool provides you with an opportunity to kind of see how you can leverage the NAS data for your uses and just increase accessibility as a whole. This is our sort of NAS 1.0. We're always looking for feedback on how we can make this tool more useful to you and what kinds of things that you want to see. That's all from me, but thank you so much. I'll toss it back over to Andrew to close us out.
Thanks, Emily. Let's go to our next slide, please. Oh, we had some.
We had some animations here, but that's all right.
Yeah. So thank you for giving us your time, and thank you to the board for inviting us. Here's our contact information. The NAS website on DOL is up at the top there. I'm happy to answer questions or connect with anybody on NAS related topics.
Great, thank you. I think there's a series of questions, and I'll go board member Lightstone.
Well, I'm not sure who to address this to. I was just curious, is there any connection between the NAWS data and the setting of the adverse effect wage rate? That's my question.
No, no. Adverse effect wage rate is not used or does not rely on NAWS data. That is the Farm Labor Survey.
Exactly,
Is the
yeah.
farm is the primary source of that data.
Okay, thanks.
And I have a few questions. One, this was so interesting, and I just really appreciate the work that you do and for taking the time to present to our board here. I was curious if you could share a little bit about what was the impetus to establish the NAWS, and you know, to my, you know, obviously we focus a lot on ag, and I don't know if there's other really industry-specific studies that are as comprehensive like this, but I'd be curious to learn about kind of the rationale. And then also if you can share what, if there's anything like either at OSHA or maybe at USDA or other agencies that you know kind of key to the NAWS for certain policy implementation or programs or whatnot, or if it's helped support, say, you know, the USDA farm food worker program or things like that. I don't know if you have any examples, but I'd be really curious.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take that. So to answer your first question, the NAWS was not specifically mandated, but by the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act. However, that act mandated an enumeration of farm labor supply. So essentially, we want to count how many seasonal agricultural workers. The NAWS was established to meet that goal, housed in the Department of Labor, and over the intervening years has evolved to tackle a multitude of different interagency data collection needs. To answer your, I think there's a second question nested in there. I don't know of a similar data collection resource that covers different industries. I'm sure we could come up with some examples, but I will speak to that last piece. Yeah, we have a lot of different examples of how the different agencies are utilizing NAWS data. Even within the Department of Labor, we have groups like Monitor Advocate and the National Farm Worker Jobs Program that use our data to estimate need. We work with ACF, the Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, to estimate demand for migrant education and migrant seasonal Head Start, those types of programs. We work with USDA and FDA to try and understand the questions that we are proposing on foodborne illness. Those are the results of a collaboration with USDA. Legal Services Corporation, trying to estimate the demand for legal services for migrant and seasonal farm workers. So yeah, our reach is pretty vast across the federal government, and we take that role very seriously. And we will continue to kind of seek out collaborations to make sure that we're leveraging this in the public interest. I hope that answers all your questions.
That does. It does. I have a couple others, but that does. Thank you. Another question I have that I think sort of is explained in part a little bit by the origin, but is there any particular reason? It seems like ag work that deals with livestock has been excluded, and I'm curious if there's any reason why and why that may continue.
That is a good question. I do not have the answer to, but my colleague Daniel Carroll at the Department of Labor would have a better sense of that, so I can put you in contact with him.
Great, thanks. And then I'll open the floor to others who may have questions or comments, but just want to commend you on coming up with a more user-friendly data tool. Won't name and shame any other agencies, but there have been times I've tried to use some other data sources, and I don't have a research background, and I found it very challenging. And that can be said for many levels of government. So it's not a federal problem alone, but really commend you guys for creating something, and I'm excited to kind of tool around and explore. I'll open up. Do any of my other colleagues have any questions? Since Member Flores.
Yes. I think we have an echo. Hello? Hello? Well, you know, we're just going to go ahead and go with it. Just a quick question. So I think the NOS data finder tool is fantastic. Will the, or are the findings, or will the findings be made available in a language other than English?
That is a good question that I don't think we had considered. And now that you've brought that up, I think that's a fantastic thing for us to, think about and try and implement. So thank you so much.
I'm a little sad we didn't think of it ourselves.
Cynthia is one of our, has had a lot of focus on language access here on the board, so appreciate the question, yeah. I'll look to Santiago. Is there anyone in the queue who's indicated they have a question? And if anyone wants to use the raise hand feature, I'm keeping my eyes peeled there too.
There were a few questions posed by Lucia, and I asked her to raise her hand and indicate if she wanted to ask those directly via the Zoom feature.
Yeah, we would welcome that, and I should note that there's limitations on the chat, so only Santiago is able to see the chat questions. And we do ask for the point of the record, if you're able to share your name and organization if applicable, and then have your questions verbalized, that's helpful, so it can be part of the record of the proceedings. So with that, we'll wait to see if we see any hands raised. I'm using the Zoom chat feature, or the Zoom, I see Julie. We'll go
Hi, sorry, my hand was raised, but I think you guys didn't see it because it was obscured by the ALRB icon. Yeah, thank you for this presentation. This is very informative. So in addition to adding H-2A workers, have there ever been discussions about increasing the number of the sample? And what are those? I'm just, because it's always been like, I mean, the greater the number, right? I assume the more accuracy we would get, as long as all the safeguards are in place. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, the other piece of that is the greater the sample, the more we're able to disaggregate on degrees that we care about, right? We want to do disaggregation on different characteristics to be able to speak to that. All that said, the key question is resources. It's money. We need money to increase the sample size, and this is an operation that runs pretty lean as far as other federal data collection means, but we're always out there trying to find new federal partners and trying to sort of increase the resources we can allocate. That's really the limiting factor. But you're absolutely right. Increasing sample size, it is always something that's on top of mind for us.
Thank you. And I see, Lucia, your hand is raised. If you want to go off mute.
Thank you very much. Again, Dr. Lucia Vasquez, ALRB Outreach, but I also happen to have been part of what used to be called the RAW, Replacement Agricultural Workers, when it very first started. And the reason it started was because theoretically they had closed the border and they wanted to know, are we going to have enough workers? So I was regional director there, but I do have some questions for you. Thank you so much. I love this information. My first question is, how did you determine their annual income, understanding that farm work is seasonal? So you are taking their salary or their income live, right? Because they're actual workers, but would you get the whole year so that you're taking into account the non-working sessions when you guys put that income in there? And then my second question has to do with whether the changes are, I didn't see anything to ask them, do they have the opportunity to talk about sexual assault or sexual harassment, or how often they're exposed to that, or even we're noticing an increase in drug or alcohol was reported by the UC Merced Health Study. I'm just wondering, are those questions, since we have so few opportunities to really ask farm workers these kinds of questions, if those are in there at all? Thank you.
Yeah, hi Lucia. Thanks for your question. On the income questions, we ask the workers, how much did you make, in the last year, essentially, and we give them a list of income ranges that are, it's a bit longer than the ranges, or there's smaller ranges that we have them pick from than what I showed on the slide. But we ask them and they tell us which range they estimate. Their personal income was their income from agriculture and their family's income. So it's worker reported. We do ask them, in their current job, we ask them how much their last paycheck for and the length of time that covered. So it could be a week or 2 weeks or some other interval. And then we ask them how many hours they worked within that period. So we kind of have a rough idea of how much they would make based on their current job. But you're right, they might have many sources of income, so we ask them to estimate their income, which is why I showed both family income and the hourly wage, which with the data we collect, the hourly wage is easier for us to calculate.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, you had a second question in there. Forgive me, I forget what. Could you repeat this?
Regarding, is there any way that they can record or tell you about sexual harassment, sexual assault, or things like an increase in alcohol abuse or drug use at work?
Good question. So for the new round of questions that we've been developing, we did focus groups, and in those focus groups, we did hear, from workers who had experienced some kind of sexual assault or sexual harassment while working. That is not a question that is currently in the list of things that we are planning to add, but it is on our radar for things to add. For alcohol or other substance use, we don't have direct questions about that either. I think in the new, I'm not sure if it made it into the final round of questions, but we do have a question where we ask what kind of liquids they are drinking on the job. So what kind of beverages they're drinking, and alcoholic beverages is included in that. So we will have a way to measure how prevalent alcohol use for hydration is.
Thank you.
What's going on? Okay, I don't know why. Oh, wait. Can we hang that up and then? Okay, we have no idea why that echo just came out of nowhere. So apologies for that. Another question, well, a note and a question. One, on that last point, we had a presentation in November, I think, of 2022. It was the end of 2022, where or no, it was October 2022, where we discussed mental health in farm workers. And there was some really interesting research out of San Diego State. I can find the links for some of that, but they talked about observing substance abuse on the job and sort of secondary effects for workers who were working alongside or riding buses along with colleagues who may be on drugs or alcohol. My other question was, similar to us, you're representatives of, either work in a government agency or representing a government agency. In our experience, we know that there's a lot of mistrust with of government in general, when you're dealing with populations that may not be documented and you're asking, sensitive questions that get right at that. I'm curious what your strategies are and how you approach this work to ensure workers feel comfortable speaking to you at all, and then giving you candid information. I think that'll be helpful for us.
Yes, so this is always a constant challenge, and we try very, very hard to do everything that we can to, you know, we down to avoiding certain colors of cars that we show up on in the fields to, you know, so that the workers won't associate our cars with like an INS or some kind of law enforcement or immigration service or anything like that. And we, you know, all of our interviewers are either, you know, native Spanish speakers who also speak English, or are, you know, native Spanish speakers. Otherwise, our interviewers are very experienced. I think our newest interviewer has been with us for about 5 years. Our most senior interviewer has been with the project for more than 30 years, I think almost since the very beginning of the survey. So we have very experienced interviewers who, you know, speak the language, are familiar with the culture. They are very good at creating a rapport with the workers. And we have, you know, information pamphlets with us that explain what the survey is, how the data is used. We are very careful to, you know, make sure that we explain to them. We actually don't share any personal characteristics, like personally identifiable information. We collect some limited personally identifiable information, such as the worker's name, but we actually don't share that with DOL. So we're careful to, you know, make sure that we tell the workers, you know, even DOL can't identify them based on the data that we provide to them. And that is by design, to make sure that the survey is as anonymous as possible. We have very strict protocols to ensure that supervisors aren't kind of hanging around in the background or aren't within earshot of the interview while it's happening. So, you know, our protocols and our procedures and the information that we provide are all designed around, you know, trying to establish and maintain trust with the crop labor force. And, you know, we're always looking at new strategies or new ideas for how to continue that and how to enhance that to the extent that we can.
Thank you so much. Those are, I have other questions, but in the interest of time, those are my most burning ones. This was such a wonderful presentation. And I just really appreciate all your work, and excited about some of the proposed changes, and you'll be hearing from us in a more formal capacity. Do any of my colleagues or anyone else have any questions?
Just a thank you for all their work. It's great stuff. A good presentation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you. The PowerPoint was really good too. So thank you to our presenters, and we won't keep you. You're obviously more than welcome to stay. We are going to transition to the public comment portion of the meeting. So if anyone wishes to make a comment, please indicate by either raising your hand or messaging Santiago in the chat. All right, seeing and hearing none, the board will now recess into closed session. Todd, if you can just make sure to stay on just for some housekeeping, and we'll go from there. Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 1:06 p.m. and the board has returned from closed session. Our last agenda item is announcements. The board is meeting again tomorrow for the purposes of deliberating in closed session. And that meeting will be at 1 p.m. Both virtually and at our conference room at 1325 J Street. And yes, other than that, we will be meeting tomorrow. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.